Well, we have a really great session. I'm a little bit biased because we have Imran Hashmi here from AbbVie, and I'm a new AbbVie employee, so I'm super excited to be able to promote him and some of the work that I already know he is working on and has worked on, and as well as some of his team here today too. So Imran is currently newly the senior director, he just got promoted, for human capital data and digital strategy at AbbVie. And he's gonna talk to us about upstream and downstream kind of integration of technologies and helping build out people analytics capabilities. And also, I think a little bit about how that helps then support employee experience as well. And then we're just gonna talk a little bit through about building an HR technology roadmap, building a data governance board, and how he did that and the importance and value he has found in that work and being able to then build upon that and execute on his strategy. So without further ado, Imran.
All right, thanks, Michael. Hello, everyone. As Michael mentioned, my name is Imran Hashmi. I lead our data and digital strategy organization at AbbVie. So throughout the day today, I heard many different takes on how people define ecosystem, who's our client, who's our customer, what should we focus on, what should we not focus on. And I have my own hot take on how we approach people analytics. So having done this for close to 10 years now at AbbVie, we've all learned, and I'm sure there's people who have been here, done this quite a bit. As I went through the different phases of building different solutions, scaling them, trying to see them activated, I've kind of taken an approach now, which is more holistic, and I'd love to share that with you, and I hope that you resonate or you can take something away from it. Okay, so I'm gonna start with something that is actually not related to people analytics. How many people are Formula One fans here? Or at least, has anybody seen like a race live ever? Oh, really? That's awesome. I haven't seen a race live, but I went to a track one time where they were doing like trial runs, and it's just bonkers. The experience is amazing. I actually got into Formula One because I started watching this show on Netflix called Drive to Survive. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It is fantastic. I've made my way into like the third season. I only get to watch it on like airplanes and stuff. But it's fascinating, right? So let me share some facts about Formula One. We all know these cars go really fast. A Formula One car, actually, it hits top speeds of about 230, 240 miles an hour. And even more fascinating than that is these cars can take corners, like they can go around bends at 160 miles an hour. So big numbers, and I always try to think about how do I connect these numbers to my own experience. So I'm assuming a lot of people took a flight to come here, right? As you are sitting on your plane comes to the runway, right? The jets turn on and the plane accelerates. You know that top speed that plane hit before it took off? That's actually that cornering speed right there. It's about 160 to 180 miles an hour. So these things take corners at speeds almost at or faster than the planes hit their final speed before they take off, right? So that's pretty fascinating. Now, what makes this possible, right? When we think about it, sometimes you might think about, oh yeah, it's Lewis Hamilton or Max or whatever. Sometimes you might think about like the Ferrari or the McLaren or the whatever, right? It's actually a combination of things. So to make something go that fast and perform that amazing, right, you need three things. First of all, you need a track. Because if you have a dirt road, that Formula One car is not going anywhere. It's gonna keep spinning, right? You can't have potholes on it. There's a lot of engineering, actually, a lot of design that goes into creating tracks that can actually support cars going that fast on them, right? The next thing is this, engineering marvel called the car. Teams have budgets upwards of $100 million to build these cars, right? If you think about the engines that go into it, the transmissions, all the electronics and all the power systems and programming and so on and so forth. I mean, really, right, when you think about the marvel of moving a vehicle at a speed like that, I mean, a lot of it is basically designing and building that car, right? It really is like a rocket ship on wheels. And then the last part is the driver. right? You need somebody who has the skills to be able to take that machine and take it around a track at incredibly fast speeds, right? So at this point, you're like, I came to a people analytics conference, and this guy's been on about Formula One cars. The reason I bring it up is now think about it in your worlds. Think about it in our people analytics world, right? If you compare a Formula One car going really fast around a track to essentially us doing our jobs as people analytics practitioners, right? Ask yourself this question. What is the track? Who builds the cars? And who's the driver, right? So I'll walk you through each one of these steps as I look at it from my point of view. So the track here really are your upstream systems that feed into the work that people analytics does, right? It could be your human capital management system. It could be your applicant tracking system. It could be your learning management system, and so on and so forth, right? There's data coming from all different directions. Now, if you are lucky, the person who was here, not before me, but the one before, when she was talking about how they are lucky enough to work with a clean data set, how many people can resonate with that? Because I know I can't, right? It's very difficult. So if you get to that point, listen, you've already made it. You don't need to listen to any of us, right? But majority of us, we're not working with clean data, right? And when we say clean data, what do we mean? So I'm gonna make some very real connections here of what my experience has been like, right? So to me, where this whole thing becomes critical is when you try to create traceability and lineage of data, if you don't have your upstream systems that can support it, it becomes very, very, very challenging, right? And then you end up spending 90% of your time just getting the data ready for any analytics. So that's why the track, what I call the track, it's very critical. I'll give you a couple of examples. So position management, for example. For those of you that do some sort of position management, it is absolutely critical to manage positions in whatever systems you have to have continuity, right? Because leaders come and go. Today you might have one leader, and then 6 months later you have a different leader. Now if you're trying to show a 3-year turnover trend, unless you can track that position back in time, how are you going to do that, right? And then what happens? We end up creating all kinds of data sets for that one analysis, and then the next time the question comes, you have to go back and do it again and again and again. So that's why having clean data coming from that system is actually very critical. I'll give you another example. So in our talent management work, we're always looking at movement of talent, for example, right? We're trying to see, are we moving our top talent? Are people getting cross-functional experience? Are people getting lateral experience? Well, guess what? If you don't have the system that can track if somebody had a lateral move, then how are you going to do that analysis, right? If your systems are not set up where somebody can take a lateral move and put it as a manager change, a location change, a base salary adjustment, right? Good luck trying to figure out how you're moving your talent. So that's why this stuff is important, right? You talk about your applicant tracking system, what data are you collecting, how you're collecting it, right? I'll give you another one of my favorite examples. Hire date or time to hire, right? We all do this metrics called time to hire and whatever, right? So we found out much later in the process that our talent acquisition team actually considers when somebody accepts a job, they consider that as a hire. In our operations team and for everybody else, we don't look at somebody hiring until they actually show up to the company. So even within people analytics, when we were reporting our dashboards, we were actually reporting under 2 different sets of numbers, right? Now, I can give you hundreds of these examples, but I'm sure you guys are all relating to this, right? So my first call to action here is your work actually starts further upstream than what we normally do around data science or analytics or dashboarding or consultation or whatever. You gotta go upstream and try to look at how is that data being collected. And again, look, it's not easy. You gotta work with a lot of people in IT. You might have to work with people in other departments, but that's where the influencing comes in, right? So I'll talk about it more. And by the way, if you have any questions, feel free to keep them coming because towards the end, if we don't have time, then I do wanna get to some of these questions. And if I'm gonna cover something, I'll just let you know that I'm covering. But that's my one thing, is expand your roles and start influencing your upstream systems. Because how data gets collected, that track, right? You can build the most amazing car in the world, but if you have a dirt track, that car ain't going anywhere, right? Okay, so that's one. My kind of point 1AB here is sometimes you actually need to create a data lake or a database, right? Now again, people have different points of view on it. I strongly, firmly believe that at some point, and again, sometimes people in analytics teams maintain those themselves, sometimes IT builds it for you, sometimes some other department would do it. Doesn't matter who does it. At the end of the day, we need one source of truth, right? And sometimes that source of truth is beyond your human capital management system, right? You need to do a lot of data prep, you need to do some cleaning, you need to do whatever. So that's an add-on, it's not a must-have, but in my experience, I don't think we would have been able to get anywhere unless we had actually invested in building a database. And I would love to hear your thoughts on the people that don't have it, and then the people who have done it, and how your experience has been. But to me, and to our team at least, having that database, a single source of truth, that pulls data from all these different sources and brings it in one place, and has kind of, a lot of that lineage of data, has been a game changer. Because then we don't have to spend 90% of our time cleaning the data, we spend 90% of our time doing the analysis. Yeah? Okay, so that's one. Now let's talk about building the car. I think this is where we all come in, right? So the coolest part of the job, the Formula One piece, right? It is, I think, the most complicated piece of it, and that's the part that we do, which is we build the cars, right? So whether you think about data modeling, whether you think about running different algorithms, whether you think about dashboards, analytics, whatever, right? This is where you get to play, right? Where instead of spending all this time trying to make sense of the data, instead of trying to make sure that you can stitch the data together, or you go back history and all those things, if you can influence that upstream, if you can make sure that that is reliable data that actually makes sense, that you can use, now you're running your logistic regressions, right? Now you're running your random forest. Now you're running your k-means. Now you're actually doing your analysis, whether that is prescriptive, descriptive, predictive, what have you, right? So I call this building the car. And I feel, so in my, when I started the role, I used to think this was the job. My entire job was this, right? And over time, I've realized it is the job, but there's an upstream piece to it, and then there's a downstream piece to it, right? Okay. Then the next part is the driving part of the car. Now, this is the trickiest one, because for the longest time, I used to think I'm the main character, right? Of course, we're the drivers. Who else would be a driver? Well, maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. It depends on your organization. It depends on your use case. It depends on who is actually making the decision. So you got to ask yourself this question: is ultimately, like if you keep asking the why, right? Why am I doing the analysis? What is it going to tell me? Why do I need to do it right now? If you keep asking that question, it always comes down to one thing: is who is going to use this information to make a decision about your people, right? Whether that is, do you need to expand your organization? Do you need to shrink your organization? Do you need to hire for a different skill set? Do you need to go hire in a different market? Do you need to do an acquisition? Do you need to do a divestiture? Whatever that is, right? Somebody somewhere is gonna make a decision based on your data, right? And I'll also tell you this. I tell my team this all the time. People are gonna make decisions one way or the other, right? They gotta make a decision to move things along. The best you can do is get the right data in front of them so they can make an informed decision. They can make a better decision than they were gonna make anyway, right? And so that's where this part comes in. And so think about, we've had discussions about HR business partners and the business and finance and whatever. Our job, right? Our job does not end when you have created an amazing analysis, when you've created a visual, when you have created a recommendation or whatever. Because guess what happens, right? You end up playing this game of telephone. You go and show it to your boss may or may not be a technical person, or you go tell that story to a business partner. That business partner may or may not even understand what you're saying. They may or may not be comfortable with taking that to the business leader, right? So my second call to action is own the delivery of your analysis. It is critically important, and you'll be shocked at how little of what we produce actually ends up in front of an executive leader. So those of you that are lucky enough to actually go sit on C-suites and go work, like somebody was saying earlier that they go present to the board and stuff, that is an amazing position to be in. Because if you can be in the room and you can explain it, amazing. But sometimes there's gonna be a lot that gets lost in translation. So try to identify who is the decision maker for the analysis that you're doing, for the work that you're doing, whether that is a dashboard, that is an analysis, that is some consultation work, whatever that is. And go and work with that decision maker, right? Because this is the other thing that happens, is a lot of times, they won't ask you what they actually want to ask you, right? They'll ask you maybe what they think they want. And then you could do the best job in the world, right? It's the same thing, right? If at the end of the day, you could have the best Formula 1 driver in the world. If you build them a monster truck, they're not going to be happy, right? That truck might be the most kick-ass monster truck ever in the history of the world. But what good is it for them? They're trying to take corners at 160 miles an hour. That thing is going to flip 5 times before you get there. So make sure that you identify who your decision makers are, ultimately, and then try to work with them directly as much as you can. So that, we have to own the delivery of our work, and the best way to own that delivery of our work is to go and be in the room, be in that discussion while the decision makers are making up their mind about how they're going to move the needle on things. Yeah? So how does it all come together? Again, people analytics is a cog in this machine, in this whole ecosystem where you've got your upstream systems, like the ones that I mentioned earlier. You've got a lot of work that we do. And then there's the decision-making part that look, sometimes, and you all might have organizations, right? So you might be the ultimate decision maker in the end. You might be your own customer. And if you are, well and good, right? But a lot of times, you're going to be doing work for somebody else that has to make a decision based on what you're trying to tell them. And so work with them and don't think of it as something, again, maybe you guys are already doing it, but it took me longer than it should have to realize that if I don't stay super connected to where my work lands, it usually doesn't land the way I want it to. And then you don't have the impact, right? Because at the end of the day, I think we're all here because we want to do more than what is in our job description, right? You actually want to move the needle on things, right? You spend all this time and work and effort in trying to put it together. Well, guess what? If it doesn't move the needle, then you don't have that satisfaction that you're looking for, right? The paycheck will show up, sure, right? But at the end of the day, you want to move the needle on how human capital is being managed in your organization, yeah? So I'll close it by saying that just the way, going back to our Formula 1 example, right? You need the system to work together, right? To make these machines run at a really high speed. You also, people analytics think of it as a system, as an ecosystem, right? It's not just one piece of it. I highly encourage everybody here in this room to start thinking very critically about where is your data coming from, who are the people who are defining these processes, and where do you need to influence to get that upstream data right so that you can do your work. That's one part. Part 2 of the assignment is think again very deeply and be brave about going and working directly with your decision makers. Find out who the decision maker is. It's not always the highest person on the food chain. Sometimes there's somebody in that organization that is ultimately going to make a decision. It could be a finance person. It could be a business partner. It could be the leader of the organization. Find out who that is, work with them, and deliver what you've worked on so that you can ultimately move the needle on human capital planning. Thank you. So on purpose, I left a little bit of time. I think I'm doing okay on time here. I would love to have a discussion here and some Q&A on what your experience has been like, and if you would like to share anything or ask any questions.
Ralph, have you been able to track the adoption of the decision models?
Yeah, so I think somebody else was talking about diversity metrics before. So after 2020, as many companies took that initiative, right, of focusing on their diversity initiatives, we started working with the leadership. So everybody was saying, we don't have the data. We don't know. We don't know where to go look for, where to hire. Somebody was saying, oh, we're fine. We're good. Somebody was saying, we're so far behind the 8-ball that we have no idea how to even get there, right? So the first part was to sit down and work with our leadership, which again, we had, I'll say by dumb luck, happened to be at a conference, at a meeting where all the leadership was there. Sat down, tried to agree on what is the needle we're trying to move here, right? Then came back, we built a lot of analytics, a lot of reporting, which was common across all leadership. So that was the one big thing was, look, if you talk to 3 different leaders, they're all gonna want their own thing, right? And one of the difficult things, and this is where I think you need some organizational air cover, is from your leadership or whatever, is where we were able to move the needle, is we were able to have across the board, all of our leadership agree that we will use common metrics for capturing diversity, right? And how we are moving the needle on it. Was everybody happy about it? No. Did everybody agree? No. But once we started that, it got that traction. So 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 8 months in, those numbers started to move, right? How did we know, to your question? We started getting a lot of that feedback loop. We started getting loop in the sense that, I'll give you an example. I would send that report out, and within a 30-minute, I would get 5 different emails of somebody saying, this is completely incorrect, and you need to restate your data because we hired that one person yesterday, and they're not represented over here, right? That happens, right? Can you redo this before we take it to our leader staff meeting, right? And then the other side was, thank you for showing this. Nobody believed me when I kept telling them we're moving the needle. This shows we're moving the needle. The active engagement, and even to this day, we have that active engagement. My team is sitting here, they know who those people are who email us every time. That is what tells us that this is what's moving the needle right now.
So we're moving into building our own warehouse for HR data and HCM data.
Awesome.
A couple of the anecdotes you shared about the lateral moves and position management is all stuff that we deal with.
Yeah.
There's been a certain aspect of, we've just done the intervention after we extract out of the HCM, but we're worried about it being a slippery slope because we're getting resistance to changing the business process that's leading that data. How do you balance where we intervene and just kind of clean the data ourselves versus trying to influence the business? Because ideally, we change the business process and the data comes out cleaner than it is, but we're kind of getting faced with that resistance. So how do you kind of navigate that?
I wish I had a simple answer for you. I always approach my job, and I encourage my team to think of your job as running your business, right? So when you're running a business and you have a problem, right? We have a lot of founders here, and so I'm sure they'll resonate. When you run into a problem, there's no script. You just find your way through that problem, right? Whatever that is, you do it yourself, you find somebody to do it, you make some phone calls, you call family, friends and family, whatever that is, right? You solve the problem. So in our case, I can give you my example. I don't know if that'll do anything for you. It was a lot of influencing. And so we actually did almost like a hearts and minds campaign where we would show people, for example, our talent managers, right? Our talent managers would run these analyses of how we are moving talent and so on and so forth. We would go clean up a set of the data and go back and show our talent managers, look, if the data were clean in the system, we could do this for the entire org, right? So you show them a little sliver because obviously you can't scale bad processes, right? So you would take it, clean it, make it look like what the future state would be, and then you can go back and say, hey, if our data were clean, we could do this for the entire org. Every one of you, you get a dashboard, right? It's one of those things, right? So there was a lot of influencing there, but I'm not gonna lie, there was also resistance from our operations organization, and I'll tell you why. It's not because they didn't agree. It's because they didn't have the time to change, right? When you're running just at 100 miles an hour, you don't have time to stop. So we went all the way up to CHRO and basically made him into a believer that this is important, this needs to be done, and then all through the leadership. So we actually helped our HR operations leadership get a little bit of space to be able to actually help us out, right? So that was my experience. Your mileage is gonna vary on your company. But yeah, just your organization, find a way to do it, and there's no one path, right? You can either take a top-down approach, you can take a bottoms-up approach, but doing something in a, as almost like a pilot and showing them what the future could look like, if you could just scale it, is incredibly powerful. And I would recommend doing that in addition to other things. Yeah.
Yeah, Hi, Nikush Patel from Pfizer. I'll just add to what Imran said, right? We went through the same journey at Pfizer. We built our own PX Analytics Hub and things like that, and it's exact same thing, right? What happens is when you bring those business process people from PX business or HR business and people who actually use that data, which is like business and leadership, when you bring them together and ask very simple question, the way we want to analyze is not how it's being captured. Who is wrong or who is right? Someone has to change something, right? Now you decide who has to change it. When you ask that question, you'll get answers. And more often than not, I think sometimes you'll say, okay, we are not capturing this attribute in this process, and maybe we should do something about it. Maybe we should tweak the process. But you are out of that loop. Both people will talk, and most likely it will start with HR people and sometimes some business people. And then ultimately, I think they will come to conclusion. So I think this is in my experience, that is a better way to probably handle this type of situation, because you are in the middle. You don't have any true power to change anything.
Yeah.
But when you be that matchmaker, that's where I think things get solved.
Yeah. I'll maybe add something to that. So sometimes if you are able to convey to your leadership that this work is critical, it's important, you can show them the value. Be careful what you wish for. They might come back to you and say, hey, you saw my title, right? Data and Digital Strategy. It didn't start with that. It started as Analyst for People Insights, right? That was the first title, or like 8.5 years ago. And then it added a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and now it's like Data and Digital Strategy. So, look, organizations are also looking for people who can help them solve problems, right? And so this is maybe just a little unsolicited career advice here, is as you are showing up and you're thinking beyond your strict remit and you're thinking about these things and you're working across, leadership might come back and say, you know what, we're going to expand your remit, right? And don't be afraid to take on that work, because ultimately at the end of the day, you are helping move the needle, right, on human capital planning, which is why we're trying to do all of this anyway. Makes sense?
Very true. Our CEO started using our work, and now I think we are seeing that things changing.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Any other questions? Over here.
Yeah, good.
Thank you. So with the 3 steps that you had in mind, building out the road, building the car, and then like identifying the driver, do you have like a cadence for reevaluating if it's working? Like if you build out the road, you build out the car, and then you identify the driver, and then you deliver something, or you like do a race, right? How do you go back and tweak the road or tweak the car or tweak your approach with the driver, for example?
It's a great question. So look, it's not linear, right? It all feeds into each other, right? One of the things we've done is we have created, as Michael was talking about earlier, so we felt the need to bring all of our HR technology leaders in one place, because at least at my organization, you might have a similar experience. There's no natural platform for HR leaders to come and talk about technology and data, right? They might have their HROT meetings or whatever. They might have different forums. We have like a culture forum. We have talent discussions. We have diversity discussions. There's no platform to have a discussion about data and technology. So one of the other things, a little entrepreneurial, was I convinced enough people to join my HR technology governance board. And it started out as, okay, fine, we'll show up to this meeting and see how it is, right? 2.5 years in, and that's something that's still going strong. And we bring all our business leaders, we ask them, not business, HR leaders, but we also invite leaders from IT and from finance to join, right? We have communications in there. We have talent acquisition. We have total rewards, your compensation and benefits folks. You've got talent in the room, right? You've got HR operations in the room. And the feedback loop that we created, right? Where we go put things out there, they're the ones that are getting that feedback from the business. They come and give us the feedback on what we need to tweak, where we need to invest. A lot of that discussion, so money talks, right? When we get this group together, there's a lot of discussion about funding. What are we going to fund next? What are we not going to fund? What's the roadmap look like? And when you're doing things that resonate, that funding discussion goes actually very easily. When you're doing things that are what I'll call science projects, they're not shy about telling you that this did not bring any value to the business. And that's where you start getting into, a little bit of that feedback loop. So it's not linear at all. Think about the Formula One, right? There's like 20 some races every year. If you watch the show like me, after every show, they'll sit down in the room and debrief and look at how you took this corner and how you took that corner. And drivers love to complain that the car is crap. And then, the engineers say that driver was sleeping on the wheel. And that's the healthy tension, right, that you live with, which is fantastic, because I would much rather have that healthy tension than do all this work that nobody uses in the end because either they didn't know it existed or they didn't understand what it was.
Yeah, and I think the other point to that too, Imran, is it's also about awareness, right? So
Yeah.
you don't end up with pockets within the HR organization going off and doing their own thing with technology and not understanding that decision, how that's going to affect. It goes back to the system.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. How are we doing on time? Am
We
I
got
out of
a
time?
couple more minutes.
Okay.
Or
Any-
we could break early. So
Any final questions? Or I know it's later in the afternoon. You guys can go and get a couple extra minutes. What's that?
Who's the pit here?
Who's
working the pit?
who's working the pit? That's a good question.
I got that.
So it could be your support team. It could be IT. It could be external vendor partners, right? Because look, as you build a car and as you get it going, right, you think about the build and the maintenance piece, right? So we have IT partners, for example, that make sure that our data is refreshed every month, that they run a bunch of audits on it. There's uptime of like 99% that we expect in all of our systems. If I can I might have to think about it a little bit more, but to me, right, if you think about the pit crew, which is making sure that like the tires are getting changed, the car's ready when you come into a pit stop, whatever, there is a support team that goes through with it. I will say this though, I try my best to make sure that our people analytics team is not the pit crew. Because you don't want to be stuck in doing operational reporting. And I say the word stuck because I've been stuck there, sorry. I've been stuck there for like a number of years. That demand on your time will drain you and it will stop you from doing things that you need to do to critically support the business.
Question. How do you create? So there are many stakeholders involved, right? Obviously business and IT and your team, people analytics team. How do you create win-win for everybody? Because at the end of the day, it's organizational, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there is all politics everywhere, right?
Agreed.
How do you create that win-win situation that way everybody benefits from this?
You got to make sure it's their idea. Or whatever you are doing, there's a saying, I don't know the saying, but it says that, the definition of being smart is making people think what they're doing is actually their idea while it's yours type of thing. So look, you have to be very clear on what is the needle and where you're trying to move it, right? I gave that diversity example, right? It wasn't just AbbVie because everybody was trying to do the same thing, right? It was first the what, right? Was very clear that, okay, we need to do more to have visibility of diversity in the organization. Okay, diversity where? In leadership, for women, for underrepresented minorities, at senior levels of the organization, in the US, outside, right? So the what gets defined and you align on that. The why is a philosophical thing that you get into if you have to. If you agree on the what, then you just move on, right? And then you can figure out the how, right? People can disagree on the how all day, every day. My experience is, if you agree on the why and the what, you're not going to lose them just because your how was different. So I try to focus on those two. Yeah, because we'll do things a little bit differently, and nobody's, as I said, every leader wanted to report their own way. Sure, we picked one and we just ran with it, right? And they complained and everything else, but 3 months in, everybody was using it. Mike, how long has it been since we've been sending those? 3 years, 2 or 3 years? Right? Yeah, 3 years. We've been sending it out every month for 3 years now, and they all use it. So that's my, take on it: is align on the why, align on the what. How's fine.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.